The memorial service for Walker is a sea of black suits and dresses, faces arranged in the appropriate masks of somber respect. I stand at the back, nursing a plastic cup of lukewarm coffee that tastes like cardboard and regret. Death has a way of drawing out the vultures and the mourners alike, and my job is to figure out which is which in this particular flock. I didn't know Walker personally, but when Julia Brooks called me with concerns about his accidental death, I agreed to look into it. Decades as a detective have taught me that memorial services reveal more than police reports ever could. People let their guards down when they think everyone's too busy grieving to notice. The community center has been dressed up for the occasion. Folding chairs aligned in neat rows, a table with refreshments against one wall, and a large portrait of Walker, smiling blandly at his own farewell party. He looks younger in the photo than the man described in the police report. 53, successful businessman, pillar of the community, found dead at the bottom of his stairs with a broken neck. Simple accident, they said. Case closed. My eyes drift to the widow. Marion Walker stands near the front, accepting condolences with the practiced grace of a society woman. She's tall, elegant in her black dress, blonde hair swept into a chignon. There's something theatrical about her grief. A handkerchief that appears at precisely timed intervals, shoulders that shake just enough to be noticeable without disturbing her perfect makeup. She isn't what I expected. The widow's eyes are dry, despite the occasional dab at them, and when she thinks no one is watching, her expression settles into something closer to exhaustion than sorrow. Not the face of a woman destroyed by grief, but one who's performing a role she finds tiresome. Across the room, a girl stands alone, separate from the clusters of murmuring adults. She's maybe 13, South Asian, with long black hair in braids and dark, watchful eyes that seem to take in everything. She wears an oversized black sweater that swallows her small frame, making her look even more childlike and vulnerable. What catches my attention isn't just her isolation, but the way others maintain it. Adults give her a wide berth, their eyes sliding past her as if she's invisible. When one woman accidentally drifts too close, she flinches away like she's been burned. The girl notices. A flicker of hurt crosses her face before she tucks it away beneath a careful blank expression. I set my coffee down and make my way through the crowd, nodding at appropriate intervals when someone makes eye contact. Fragments of conversation drift past me. Such a shame about Walker. He was always so careful on those stairs. Marion's holding up remarkably well, considering... Heard they were having problems, but who doesn't these days? Strange how quickly she arranged everything. I pause near a group of older men, their voices lowered conspiratorially. He filed those reports, you know. Domestic disturbances, twice last year. Hush, that's all water under the bridge now. Still, makes you wonder. Their conversation dissolves into weather talk when they notice me. I move on, filing away the information for later. The girl, Lila Patel, according to the program, hasn't moved from her spot by the window. As I watch, Marion Walker approaches her, a smile fixed on her face that doesn't reach her eyes. She leans down to say something to Lila, one hand reaching out as if to touch her shoulder. The girl recoils, almost imperceptibly, and Marion's hand freezes mid-air. For a moment, something hard and cold flashes across the widow's face, gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Lila says something in response, her voice too low to hear, and Marion straightens, nodding stiffly before turning away. The interaction lasts less than 20 seconds, but leaves both of them visibly tense. A petite woman with dark hair and tired eyes materializes at Lila's side, placing a protective hand on her daughter's back. Mrs. Patel, I presume. She whispers something to Lila, who shakes her head slightly. I make my way over, offering my condolences when they look up. Ray Marshall, I say. I knew Walker through business associates. A lie, but a necessary one. Mrs. Patel nods. Patel, this is my daughter, Lila. Lila doesn't meet my eyes, keeping her gaze fixed somewhere around my left shoulder. It's a difficult day, I offer. You knew Walker well? I clean for Mrs. Walker twice a week, Mrs. Patel says, her voice soft but precise. Mr. Walker was always kind to Lila. Something in her emphasis makes me wonder about Mrs. Walker's treatment of the girl. Lila is sensitive, Mrs. Patel adds, with a glance at her daughter that contains volumes of unspoken meaning. Being here is hard for her. Lila shifts uncomfortably, and I notice she keeps her hands tucked into her sweater sleeves as if afraid of accidental contact. I understand, I say, though I don't, not really, but there's clearly something more to this sensitivity than ordinary teenage discomfort. The service begins before I can ask more questions. We take our seats, and I find myself watching the widow as much as the proceedings. Marion Walker sits ramrod straight in the front row, occasionally touching the corners of her eyes with her handkerchief. Her composure never cracks, not even during the eulogy, when a friend describes Walker as the most devoted husband. I notice Lila watching Marion too, her dark eyes intent and troubled. When the pastor speaks of Walker being at peace now, the girl flinches as if he said something obscene. My hands are cold despite the stuffiness of the room, but I feel a warmth in my chest, that uncomfortable heat that comes from knowing I'm witnessing something important, but not yet understanding what it is. There's wrongness here, lurking beneath the surface of proper grief and community support. Walker's death might have been ruled an accident, but nothing about this room feels accidental. As the service concludes and people rise for the reception, I decide to stay. The real stories never emerge during the official proceedings anyway. They slip out in the aftermath, when people think the performance is over. And I have a feeling that Lila Patel, with her careful isolation and watchful eyes, knows something that makes the adults around her nervous. Something about Walker, or his death, or perhaps most interestingly, about his widow. I just need to find out what it is. The receiving line forms after the service like an assembly line of grief, each person stepping forward to offer Marion Walker their rehearsed condolences. I linger near a potted fern, watching the widow's performance, because that's what it is. A performance. Her smile appears and disappears with mechanical precision, her hand extended just long enough for propriety before withdrawing. What interests me more is that Lila and her mother have joined the line, the girl's reluctance evident in every shuffling step. Lila keeps her eyes fixed on the floor, her braids swinging forward to shield her face. Her hands remain tucked firmly into her sweater sleeves, and she maintains a careful distance from those around her. Mrs. Patel keeps one protective hand on her daughter's back, guiding her forward as the line inches toward Marion. I've seen enough nervous witnesses to recognize anxiety when I see it. The girl is practically vibrating with tension. Whatever this sensitivity her mother mentioned, it clearly makes social situations like this difficult. But there's something more specific in her discomfort, something that sharpens whenever her gaze flickers toward the widow. An elderly couple steps away from Marion, leaving only one person between the Patels and the widow. Lila whispers something urgent to her mother, who shakes her head firmly and keeps them moving forward. I shift my position, angling for a better view, while maintaining my cover as just another mourner paying respects. Now they're face to face with Marion Walker. Mrs. Patel murmurs something, condolences, presumably, while Lila stands slightly behind her, still not making eye contact. Marion responds with the same practiced smile she's given everyone else, but I notice her eyes hardening as they land on the girl. "Thank you for coming, Nisha," Marion says to Mrs. Patel. "And Lila, too, of course. Robert always said what a quiet, well-behaved girl you are." There's something pointed in her emphasis that makes me narrow my eyes. Marian extends her hand toward Mrs. Patel, who takes it briefly. "We're very sorry for your loss," Mrs. Patel says softly. Then Marian turns to Lila, hand still extended. The girl hesitates, finally withdrawing one hand from her sleeve. She's clearly trying to minimize contact, planning a quick, polite touch before retreating. Their fingers brush, and something electric happens. Not actual static, though it has the same jolting effect. Lila gasps audibly, her eyes flying wide open, pupils dilating in shock. Her small body goes rigid, and for a moment she seems unable to break the connection, her fingers frozen against Marian's. Marian's reaction is equally telling. A flash of alarm crosses her face, quickly masked by concern. She pulls her hand away first. "Are you all right, dear?" she asks, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby. "You look pale." Lila staggers back a step, bumping into the person behind her. Her mother's arm comes around her shoulders immediately. "I'm sorry," Mrs. Patel says, her voice tense. "She hasn't been feeling well. Please excuse us." She steers Lila away from the line toward a quiet corner of the room. I grab 2 cups of water from a nearby table and follow at a discreet distance, positioning myself behind a large floral arrangement where I can observe without being obvious. Lila is trembling visibly now, her face ashen. She keeps wiping her hand against her sweater as if trying to clean something from it. Mrs. Patel bends close, speaking rapidly in hushed tones. I strain to hear. "What happened? Did you—" Mrs. Patel stops, glancing around nervously before continuing in an even lower voice. "Did you feel something?" Lila nods, her eyes still wide with shock. "Mom," she whispers, "she's not sad. Not at all." Mrs. Patel frowns. "What do you mean?" "When I touched her." Lila's voice is barely audible. "It wasn't grief. It was relief. Joy, even. Like when you finish a really hard test, or when something you've been dreading is finally over." Her mother's expression shifts from concern to alarm. "Lila, no, you must be mistaken." "I'm not," Lila insists, though still in a whisper. "You know I can tell. It's so strong with her, Mom. She's glad he's dead." Mrs. Patel grips her daughter's shoulders. "Listen to me. You cannot say such things. Not here, not anywhere." Her voice is urgent, fearful. "People don't understand. They'll say you're lying or worse." "But no, Lila." Mrs. Patel's tone leaves no room for argument. "We are not part of this. Whatever you felt, whatever it means, it's not our business." Lila's shoulders slump, but she nods reluctantly. "It felt wrong," she murmurs, "like touching something slimy in the dark." Mrs. Patel smooths her daughter's hair, a gesture so tender it makes the warning in her next words even more striking. "Stay away from her. Don't touch anyone else. We'll leave as soon as we can without drawing attention." I step back, processing what I've just overheard. The girl has some kind of ability to sense emotions through touch, an empathic talent that apparently revealed something disturbing about the widow's true feelings. If what Lila sensed is accurate, Marian Walker is celebrating her husband's death while putting on a show of mourning. It's not evidence, not the kind that would hold up in any investigation. But in my experience, children often perceive truths that adults have learned to ignore. And a wife, relieved by her husband's accidental death, raises questions that deserve answers. I approach them, offering the cups of water. "Thought you might need these." Mrs. Patel takes them with a nod of thanks, her eyes wary. "You're very kind, Mr. Marshall." "Is your daughter all right?" I ask, looking at Lila, who keeps her gaze fixed on the floor. She seemed upset after speaking with Mrs. Walker. "Just feeling a little faint," Mrs. Patel says smoothly. "The emotion of the day, you understand." I nod, but direct my next question to Lila. "Was it something Mrs. Walker said?" Mrs. Patel answers before Lila can speak. My daughter is very sensitive to atmospheres. Crowds can be overwhelming for her. Lila remains silent, but I notice her hand has stopped its frantic wiping motion. Now she just holds it slightly away from her body, as if it's contaminated. I understand, I say, though what I understand is that I'm being politely but firmly shut out. If there's anything I can do to help— Thank you, but we're fine, Mrs. Patel says with finality. She guides Lila toward the exit, throwing one last cautious glance at Marion Walker, who is watching them with an expression I can't quite read. I return to my observation post, my mind working through the implications of what I've witnessed. If Lila's ability is real, and her reaction seemed too genuine to be faked, then Marion Walker's grief is not. And a grieving widow who isn't actually grieving is always worth a closer look. Across the room, Marion catches my eye, her practiced smile never faltering. But something in her gaze has changed, a sharpness, an assessment. For a moment, I wonder if she's noticed my interest in the Patels. Then she turns away, accepting more condolences with perfect poise. I make a mental note to look deeper into those domestic disturbance reports, and to find a way to speak with Lila Patel again, preferably without her protective mother running interference. I lose track of the Patels for nearly an hour, caught in the tedious small talk that fills these events like insulation. When I finally extricate myself from a conversation about the deceased's golf handicap, I spot Mrs. Patel speaking with the pastor, but Lila is nowhere in sight. A glimpse of movement through the French doors catches my attention, a small figure slipping into the backyard. I follow, letting the door close quietly behind me. The reception's murmur fades, replaced by the rustle of dead leaves and the distant growl of traffic. The Walker house sits on a generous plot, the backyard a carefully landscaped affair that's beginning to surrender to autumn. Ornamental grasses bend in the breeze, their seed heads nodding like mourners. A stone path winds between bare rose bushes toward a small gazebo. Lila sits on its steps, her black sweater blending with the shadows, only her face catching the weak afternoon sun. She doesn't look up as I approach, though I make no effort to silence my footsteps on the gravel. Her hair has come partially loose from its braids, a tangle of black vines framing a face too serious for 13. Her hands rest in her lap, palms up, as if she's examining them for evidence of something only she can see. "Mind if I join you?" I ask when I'm a few feet away. She startles slightly, then shrugs. Neither invitation nor rejection. I take it as permission and lower myself onto the opposite end of the step, leaving plenty of space between us. For a minute, we sit in silence. I've interviewed enough reluctant witnesses to know when patience serves better than questions. "You're not really a business associate," she finally says, still not looking at me. Her voice is soft, but unexpectedly direct. "You're watching everyone too carefully." I raise an eyebrow, impressed by her perception. "You're right. I'm a private investigator. Ray Marshall." "I know, you said before." Now she does look at me, her dark eyes assessing. "Who hired you? Was it about Mr. Walker?" "I'm just making some inquiries," I say, deliberately vague. "Nothing official." Lila's lips press into a perpetually crooked line of disinterest, but I sense it's a mask rather than genuine apathy. "You were watching me. And Mrs. Walker." It's not a question, but I answer anyway. "I notice things. It's my job, like how you reacted when you touched Mrs. Walker's hand." Her shoulders tense, and for a moment I think she might bolt. Instead, she looks down at her own hands again. "I don't like touching people." "So your mother mentioned she called you sensitive." A bitter smile flickers across her face. "That's one word for it. What word would you use?" I keep my tone casual, non-threatening. Lila plucks at a loose thread on her sleeve. "Cursed, maybe." That bad, huh? She doesn't respond directly. Instead, she asks, "Do you believe people can know things they shouldn't be able to know? Things they didn't see or hear but can feel somehow?" I consider my answer carefully. In my decades as a detective, I've encountered things that defy easy explanation, hunches that proved eerily accurate, witnesses who knew details they had no way of knowing. I've learned to be skeptical without being dismissive. "I believe some people are more perceptive than others," I say. "They pick up on small cues, things most people miss." "Is that what happened with Mrs. Walker?" Lila shakes her head slowly. "It's not like that. It's not deduction. It's direct. When I touch someone, I feel what they're feeling. Not always and not everything, but enough." She says it matter-of-factly, like she's long past trying to convince anyone. I maintain my neutral expression, neither believing nor disbelieving, just listening. "And what did you feel from Mrs. Walker?" Lila wraps her arms around herself as if suddenly cold. "Relief. Happiness. Like when you've been carrying something heavy for a long time and finally put it down." "Not grief," I say. "No, not even a little bit." Her voice has dropped to a whisper. "She's glad he's dead, Mr. Marshall." I watch a leaf spiral down from a nearby maple, taking its time to reach the ground. That doesn't necessarily mean anything criminal happened. Some marriages are unhappy. Some people feel relief when difficult relationships end, even through death. It wasn't just relief. Lila's fingers curl into fists. There was satisfaction, like she'd won something. That's more concerning. "Did you know Mr. Walker well?" "Not really. I've only been going to their house with Mom for about 6 months. He was nice to me, quiet. He seemed sad a lot." "And Mrs. Walker?" Lila's expression clouds. "She doesn't like me. She's careful not to show it when other people are around, but I can tell. She thinks She hesitates, searching for words. "She thinks I see too much." "Do you see too much?" Her eyes meet mine directly. "I see that she isn't really mourning. I see that she's pretending, and I think maybe Mr. Walker didn't just fall down those stairs." The statement hangs in the air between us. It's a serious accusation, especially coming from a child, but there's nothing childish in Lila's steady gaze or the certainty in her voice. That's a big leap from feeling someone's emotions to suspecting murder, I say, keeping my tone gentle rather than dismissive. "I know." She looks away. "That's why Mom wants me to stay quiet. She says people won't understand, that they'll think I'm making things up or trying to cause trouble." "Are you making things up?" "No." The single syllable carries absolute conviction. "I wish I was. It would be easier." I believe her, at least about believing it herself. Whether her perception is accurate, whether she truly has some empathic ability, or is simply projecting her own intuition, is another question. But in my experience, it's worth following every lead, no matter how unconventional. "Has this happened before? Sensing things from people that later turned out to be important?" She nods slowly. "Last year, at school. A teacher was always nice to everyone, but when I accidentally bumped into him in the hallway, I felt something wrong, dark, angry. I told my mom, and she made me promise not to tell anyone else." Her voice drops even lower. 2 weeks later, he was arrested for hurting his girlfriend really badly." I weigh her words, searching for the right response. Before I can speak, the French doors open, and Mrs. Patel's voice calls out. "Lila, where are you?" Lila stands quickly. "I have to go. Please don't tell my mom what I said. She worries too much already." "I won't," I promise. "But Lila, if you notice anything else about Mrs. Walker, or remember anything about Mr. Walker that might be important, will you tell me?" I offer her my card. "You can call any time." She hesitates, then takes the card, slipping it into her pocket just as her mother appears around the corner of the house. Mrs. Patel's relief at finding her daughter quickly shifts to wariness when she spots me. "Lila, we need to leave now." "Coming, Mom." Lila gives me one last glance, a silent plea in her eyes, before walking quickly to her mother's side. I remain seated on the gazebo steps, turning over our conversation in my mind. I'm not one to jump to supernatural explanations. Usually the simplest answer is the right one. But there was something compelling about Lila's certainty, something that resonates with my own nagging doubts about Walker's accident. The girl believes she felt joy from a widow on the day of her husband's funeral. My job now is to determine whether that joy indicates something more sinister than the end of an unhappy marriage. I rise and head back toward the house, where Marion Walker continues to accept condolences with perfect composure. Detective work is often about connecting dots that others don't even see, and sometimes those dots are pointed out by the most unexpected sources, like a 13-year-old girl who keeps her hands hidden in her sleeves, afraid of what she might feel if she touches the wrong person. I don't know yet if Lila Patel is truly gifted or simply intuitive beyond her years, but either way, I suspect she's just handed me the first real thread in this investigation. Now, I need to see where it leads. The Walker house sits like a well-dressed widow itself, immaculate, expensive, and holding secrets behind a composed exterior. 2 days after the memorial service, I find myself in its foyer, invited in by Marion Walker with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. The house smells of lemon polish and fresh flowers, as if death has been scrubbed away, leaving only the appropriate scent of mourning behind. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Marshall," Marion says, gesturing toward a living room that belongs in a magazine spread. "Julia mentioned you had some questions about Robert's accident, though I can't imagine what more there is to discuss." I note the slight emphasis on accident, the way her hand brushes imaginary lint from her charcoal dress. Julia Brooks, Walker's cousin and my actual client, had paved the way for this visit, telling Marion I was helping the family tie up loose ends. A convenient fiction. "I appreciate your time," I say, following her into the living room. Losing someone suddenly leaves many questions. The living room tells its own story. Tasteful furniture arranged just so, family photos in silver frames, but I notice they're mostly of Marion. Marion at charity events, Marion accepting awards. Walker appears in fewer images than I'd expect for a man who lived here. In the ones where he is present, he stands slightly behind his wife, his smile never quite convincing. "The stairs are this way," Marion says, leading me to the foyer again. This is where it happened. The staircase is grand, curved, with hardwood steps and a polished banister. I study it carefully, noting the height and angle of each step, the distance to the marble floor below. "He'd been upstairs in his study," Marion continues, her voice steady. "I was out at my book club. When I came home—" She pauses, touching her throat delicately. "Well, you can imagine." "I can, but something doesn't fit." "These steps have a non-slip treatment," I observe. "Yes, Robert was always careful about safety." Her eyes flick away momentarily. "That's what makes it so shocking. The police said he must have tripped." "Did your husband drink, Mrs. Walker?" "Socially. He wasn't intoxicated, if that's what you're asking. The autopsy confirmed that." I nod, filing away her quick knowledge of the autopsy results. Most grieving spouses avoid such details. "And the police investigated thoroughly?" I ask, moving back toward the living room. Marion follows, her heels clicking precisely on the hardwood. "Of course, though there wasn't much to investigate. An unfortunate accident." We sit across from each other, Marion perched on a cream-colored sofa, her posture perfect. I notice she's positioned herself in front of a large abstract painting, its swirls of blue and gold framing her like an expensive halo. "I understand there were domestic disturbance calls," I say, watching her carefully. Her expression doesn't change, but her fingers tense slightly on the sofa cushion. A misunderstanding. Neighbors heard us arguing and overreacted. Robert and I had passionate discussions sometimes. 2 calls in the past year. As I said, misunderstandings. Her smile is practiced, empty. Robert could be difficult when stressed about work, but he would never... She stops, recalibrates. We had a normal marriage, Mr. Marshall, with normal conflicts. I ask several more questions about Walker's daily routine, his health, his state of mind in the weeks before his death. Marion's answers come too quickly, too smoothly, as if she's rehearsed them. When I inquire about Walker's relationships outside the marriage, a flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crosses her face before she controls it. Robert was well respected in the community, she says. He had many business associates. Any close friends? Someone he might have confided in? My husband was a private person. Her response is clipped. Now, if there's nothing else, I have appointments this afternoon. I thank her for her time, leaving my card on the glass coffee table. If you think of anything else that might help us understand what happened to your husband, please call. She walks me to the door, maintaining her perfect composure, but as I step outside, I catch a glimpse of her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her shoulders dropping in relief, the mask of grief sliding away now that her performance is over. 2 hours later, I'm sitting across from Officer Dennison at the police station, reviewing the domestic disturbance reports. Dennison is young, eager to help, especially after I mentioned Julia Brooks's name. Nothing suspicious about the accident, Dennison says, sliding the file across his desk. Broken neck, consistent with a fall down those stairs. No signs of struggle, no evidence anyone else was in the house. I flip through the autopsy report, noting the details. Tell me about these domestic calls. Dennison shifts uncomfortably. Not much to tell. Neighbor reported shouting last December. Mrs. Walker said they were arguing about Christmas plans. Then in March, another call. That time, Mr. Walker himself called. Said there'd been a misunderstanding. Everything was fine. He called to report a disturbance, then said it was a misunderstanding? That's right. Dennison frowns. Seemed nervous, according to the responding officer's notes. But there were no visible injuries, and both parties denied any physical altercation. I tapped the file thoughtfully. Were there any other incidents involving either of the Walkers? Complaints, reports, anything? Dennison hesitates. Nothing official. But Walker came in about 3 months ago, wanted to talk to someone about, well, he wasn't specific. Seemed agitated. Said his wife had been acting strangely, that he was concerned about some new people she was spending time with. Did he file a report? No, he left before speaking to a detective. Called the next day to say he'd overreacted. I make a note of the date. Another thread to pull. Anything else? I ask. Dennison shakes his head. That's all we have. By all accounts, Walker's death was a tragic accident. I thank him and leave, the case file copies tucked under my arm. The official story is neat, tidy, too tidy. Across town, in a modest apartment, Lila Patel sits at the kitchen table, watching her mother prepare dinner. The chopping of vegetables is too forceful, the silence between them heavy with unspoken concerns. You shouldn't have talked to that man, Mrs. Patel finally says, her voice low. I didn't tell him anything important. Lila lies, the weight of Ray Marshall's business card still present in her pocket. We stay out of other people's business. Her mother points the knife for emphasis. It's safer that way. Lila traces a pattern on the tabletop with her finger. What if Mr. Walker didn't just fall? What if she hurt him? Mrs. Patel's chopping stops abruptly. That is not our concern. Your sensitivity already causes enough trouble. We cannot afford to draw attention. Like with Dad, you mean? Lila says quietly. Her mother's back stiffens. We do not speak of that. Maybe we should. Maybe if we had... Enough! The knife comes down hard on the cutting board. Some secrets must stay buried, Lila, for everyone's safety. Lila falls silent, but her mind races. Her mother has always been afraid of her ability, afraid of what it might reveal. About others, about their family, about the father whose name is never mentioned but whose absence shapes their every decision. She touches the business card in her pocket, wondering what secrets Marion Walker is burying and whether Ray Marshall will be able to dig them up before someone else gets hurt. My notebook is divided into neat columns: name, date, touch, feeling. I've been at this for 3 days now, turning my curse into a science experiment like we did with plants in biology. Except instead of measuring sunlight and growth, I'm measuring emotions and lies. The last column is the hardest. Truth? Because I'm still not sure if what I feel is real, or just my imagination making monsters in the dark. I sit cross-legged on my bed, chewing on my pencil as I review my notes. The detective, Mr. Marshall, is the first adult who didn't look at me like I was crazy or making things up. But that doesn't mean I'm right about Mrs. Walker. Maybe I just felt what I expected to feel. Maybe this whole ability is just me projecting my own thoughts onto others. Hence the experiment. Day 1, Mom, kitchen, hand on shoulder. Feeling, worry, fear, love underneath. Truth, definitely worry. She's been anxious since the memorial service, but also definitely love. That part I've always known, even without touching her. Day 1, Mr. Chen, corner store. Fingers brushed while giving change. Feeling, mild irritation, background sadness. Truth? Later saw him arguing with delivery driver. His mother has been sick. Mom mentioned it last week. Day 1, Abby, school hallway, high five. Feeling, excitement, secret, truth. She announced she's going to New York with her dad next weekend. Hadn't told anyone yet when I touched her. The list goes on. 23 experiments so far, 23 touches, some accidental, some deliberate but casual. Each one sending a jolt of someone else's emotions through me, like plugging into their emotional circuit board for just a second. I've felt happiness that made my skin tingle, anger that burned like touching a hot stove, sadness that settled in my chest like cold water. Each time I've written it down, then tried to verify if what I felt matched reality. The results are unnervingly consistent. I flip to a new page where I've written my conclusions so far. 1. The feelings are strongest with skin-to-skin contact. 2. Emotions that are intense or being actively hidden come through clearest. 3. I can't read thoughts, just emotions. 4. The feeling fades within minutes, but strong emotions can linger for hours. 5. Some people feel louder than others. And then the last point, underlined twice, Mrs. Walker was glad her husband was dead. That's what started all this. That moment at the memorial service when our hands touched, and instead of grief, I felt a surge of relief and satisfaction so strong it nearly knocked me over, like she'd accomplished something difficult and was secretly celebrating. I've felt something similar once before, when I was 10. My music teacher, Mr. Evans, hugged me after a recital. What came through wasn't pride or happiness, but a sickening twist of something dark and hungry. 2 weeks later, he was arrested for having inappropriate photos of children on his computer. No one believed me when I tried to tell them something was wrong with him. Not even Mom. That's why I have to be sure about Mrs. Walker. I can't make accusations based on just one touch, one feeling. I need more evidence, which is why I'm about to break every rule Mom has ever set for me. I pull on my blue hoodie and slip my notebook into my backpack. Mom won't be home until 7. Her Thursday cleaning job always runs late. I scribble a note saying I'm at the library studying with Abby, then slip out the apartment door. The bus drops me 3 blocks from Rosewood Avenue, where Mom cleans for the Hendersons every Thursday. Mrs. Henderson loves to talk, and last week Mom came home complaining that she'd spent 20 minutes listening to gossip about Mrs. Walker's daily ritual. How she always goes to the same cafe near the park at 4:30, wearing funeral black like it's going out of style. It's 4:15 now. I walk quickly, keeping my head down, trying to look like a normal kid heading home from school. The cafe comes into view, a fancy place with outdoor tables and heat lamps for the cooling fall weather. I position myself on a bench across the street, partially hidden by a newspaper dispenser, and wait. Mrs. Walker arrives at exactly 4:32, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe twist, her black coat buttoned to her throat despite the mild afternoon. She sits at a table facing away from the street and orders something from a waiter who seems to know her. A regular, then. At 4:45, a man approaches her table. He's tall, distinguished-looking, with silver-streaked dark hair and an expensive suit. Not someone I recognize from the memorial service. He sits across from Mrs. Walker, and even from this distance I can see how her posture changes, softening, leaning forward, her hand reaching across the table to touch his. My stomach tightens. This doesn't look like a business meeting. I watch them for 20 minutes as they talk, their heads close together, occasionally touching hands. Mrs. Walker laughs at something he says, a genuine laugh that transforms her face in a way I never saw at the memorial service, not even when she was putting on her show of being the grieving widow. When they stand to leave, I make my decision. I slip across the street, timing my approach to intersect with their path to the parking lot. "Excuse me," I say, bumping into Mrs. Walker as if by accident, my bare hand briefly touching her wrist. "Sorry." The contact lasts less than a second, but it's enough. A wave of emotions crashes over me, anticipation, desire, excitement, and underneath it all, a cold calculation that makes my skin crawl. Not a trace of sorrow or loss. Mrs. Walker barely glances at me. "Watch where you're going," she says, before continuing her conversation with the man, her hand now resting possessively on his arm. I hurry away, my heart pounding, and find a quiet corner of the park to record what I felt. My hand shakes as I write, Day 3, Mrs. Walker, cafe, brushed wrist, feeling, excitement, desire, calculation, no grief, with unknown man, truth, definitely involved with this man, definitely not mourning her husband. But there's more, something I can't quite put into words in my neat columns. When I touched her this time, beneath all those other emotions, I felt something dark and satisfied, the same feeling I got at the memorial service, but sharper now, more defined, like someone who has gotten away with something terrible and is enjoying their success. I close my notebook and lean back against a tree, suddenly cold despite the afternoon sun. What do I do with this? Tell Mr. Marshall? Tell Mom? Both options feel impossible. Mom would be furious I went behind her back, and Mr. Marshall might not believe me anyway. But if Mrs. Walker did something to her husband, if she's somehow responsible for his accident, and I say nothing. I pull out the detective's card from my pocket, turning it over in my hands. The paper is thick, official feeling, with his name and number printed in simple black letters. Ray Marshall, private investigator. What would he do with what I've discovered? Would he take the word of a 13-year-old girl who claims to feel other people's emotions? I put the card away without calling. Not yet. I need something more concrete than feelings, something that doesn't rely on my weird ability that most people don't believe in. Tomorrow, I decide. Tomorrow I'll follow Mrs. Walker again. Maybe I'll learn who the man is, or overhear something useful. Maybe I'll find actual evidence that doesn't require anyone to believe in what I can do. And if I do find something real, then I'll call Mr. Marshall. I'll have to. Because whatever Mrs. Walker did, whatever she's hiding behind her perfect black clothes and practiced grief, it's not something I can carry alone. I tuck my notebook deep into my backpack and head for the bus stop, the weight of someone else's secrets heavy on my shoulders. Willowbrook Middle School smells exactly like every school I've ever entered in 40 years of detective work. Floor polish, cafeteria food, and the particular musk of adolescent anxiety. I stand in the main office, surrounded by motivational posters and trophy cases, waiting for the school psychologist who Mrs. Patel insisted I meet. The call came yesterday evening, her voice tight with resignation rather than anger. "If you're going to involve my daughter in your investigation," she'd said, "then you should understand what you're dealing with." I hadn't told her about my conversation with Lila at the Walker Memorial, which means either Lila confessed or Mrs. Patel found evidence of her daughter's continued interest in the case. Either way, this meeting feels like a concession from a mother who's realized she can't keep her daughter in a protective bubble any longer. "Mr. Marshall?" A woman in her 50s appears in the doorway, hand extended. "I'm Dr. Brenner. Thank you for coming." We shake hands briefly. She's tall, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a loose bun, and glasses that magnify eyes sharp with intelligence. "Ms. Patel arranged this?" I confirm as she leads me down a hallway lined with student artwork. "Yes, she's concerned about Lila's involvement in whatever case you're investigating." She gives me a sidelong glance. "She says you're looking into Robert Walker's death." I nod, non-committal. "I'm following up on some questions for the family." "And Lila has somehow become involved?" She shared some observations with me. Dr. Brenner unlocks a door marked Counseling Services and ushers me into a small office. Unlike the institutional beige of the hallway, these walls are painted a soft blue. Plants crowd the windowsill, and a bookshelf holds titles on childhood development alongside what appear to be student art projects. It's deliberately calming, a space designed to make anxious children feel safe. "Please, sit," Dr. Brenner says, gesturing to an armchair across from her desk. "Ms. Patel has given me permission to discuss Lila's situation with you, which is highly unusual. She must trust you, or at least trust that you need this information." I settle into the chair. "I get the impression Lila has some sort of sensitivity. That's one way to put it." Dr. Brenner sits, folding her hands on her desk. "Lila experiences what we might call heightened empathic awareness. In clinical terms, it presents similarly to mirror-touch synesthesia, a neurological condition where an individual physically experiences sensations they observe in others. Except in Lila's case, it's emotional states rather than physical sensations. She feels what other people are feeling," I say, keeping my tone neutral. "When she touches them, yes, or at least that's her experience." Dr. Brenner adjusts her glasses. "From a scientific perspective, it's more likely she's unconsciously processing micro-expressions, body language, vocal tones, all the subtle cues most people register without realizing it. Lila simply has an unusually acute awareness of these signals." "But she believes she's actually sensing emotions directly?" "Yes. And from a therapeutic standpoint, the distinction isn't always relevant. What matters is that Lila's perceptions are remarkably accurate." I lean forward slightly. "How accurate?" Dr. Brenner considers me for a moment, then opens a drawer and removes a thin file. 3 years ago, Lila reported feeling something wrong, scary wrong, after touching a substitute teacher. The teacher was later arrested for domestic violence. Last year, she identified a student who was planning to harm himself, despite the student showing no outward signs of distress. "And 6 months ago?" She hesitates. "Yes?" 6 months ago, Lila refused to participate in a school assembly because she said the guest speaker made her feel sick inside when she accidentally brushed against him in the hallway. 2 weeks later, that speaker was arrested on charges I won't detail, except to say they involved children. The office feels suddenly smaller, the air heavier. That's quite a track record. It is. And those are just the documented incidents I'm aware of. Dr. Brenner closes the file. Whether her ability is supernatural or simply extraordinary perception doesn't change the fact that Lila consistently senses things others miss. Has she ever been wrong? Not that we've been able to verify, though of course absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. She removes her glasses, polishing them with a cloth from her desk. Let me be clear, Mr. Marshall. I'm a scientist and a clinician. I don't believe in psychic powers or supernatural abilities, but I do believe that the human brain is capable of processing information in ways we don't fully understand. And you believe Lila's brain does this through touch? I believe Lila has an exceptional ability to read emotional states, and that this ability seems to function most strongly through physical contact. She replaces her glasses. What has she told you about Robert Walker's death? I weigh my words carefully. She believes his wife isn't genuinely grieving, that she might have had something to do with his accident. Dr. Brenner nods slowly. And what do you believe, Mr. Marshall? I'm still gathering evidence. But you're here, which suggests you don't dismiss Lila's perception entirely. I smile slightly. In my line of work, you learn to follow every lead, even the unconventional ones. Then let me offer some professional advice. Dr. Brenner leans forward, her expression serious. Don't ignore what Lila tells you. Her mother has been trying to protect her for years, not just from others who might exploit or ridicule her ability, but from the emotional burden of knowing things about people that no child should have to carry. You think her ability is real, then, despite your scientific skepticism? I think Lila perceives truth that others miss. Whether it's through some extraordinary neurological process or something science can't yet explain, doesn't change the fact that she's rarely wrong. She pauses. And if she says Marion Walker isn't grieving her husband's death, I'd take that very seriously. Through the office window, I catch a glimpse of students changing classes in the hallway. Among them is Lila, head down, keeping close to the wall as others flow past. She looks up suddenly, as if sensing my gaze, and our eyes meet briefly through the glass. She doesn't smile or wave, but there's recognition in her expression and something like relief. Dr. Brenner follows my gaze. Lila is carrying a heavy burden for someone so young. The world is loud enough for most children. Imagine feeling not just your own emotions, but glimpses of everyone else's. Has she ever used this ability to hurt someone? Or falsely accuse them? Never. If anything, she's reluctant to share what she perceives, knowing how it sounds to others. Dr. Brenner turns back to me. Whatever Lila has told you about Marion Walker, I can assure you she believes it's true, and based on her history, there's a high probability that it is. I stand, extending my hand. Thank you for your time, Dr. Brenner. This has been enlightening. I hope it helps your investigation. She shakes my hand firmly. And Mr. Marshall, if Lila has sensed something concerning about Mrs. Walker, please be careful. People who are hiding dark truths can be dangerous when exposed. I leave the school with Dr. Brenner's warning echoing in my mind. Outside, the afternoon has turned gray, clouds gathering for an evening storm. I sit in my car for a moment, processing what I've learned. Lila Patel believes Marion Walker was glad her husband was dead. She believes she felt this emotion directly through physical contact. And according to a qualified professional with years of experience, Lila's perceptions have never been wrong. Is it enough to justify digging deeper into Walker's accident? to look more closely at Marion Walker's alibi, her relationships, her potential motives. My rational mind says no, that I need concrete evidence, not the intuitions of a 13-year-old girl with an unusual neurological condition. But my detective's instinct, honed through decades of cases, whispers that sometimes the truth reveals itself through unexpected channels. That dismissing Lila's perception would be a mistake. I start the car, decision made. I'll follow this thread, see where it leads. Check Marion Walker's movements the day of her husband's death. Look into her finances, her relationships, the domestic disturbance calls that were too quickly dismissed as misunderstandings. And I'll keep an eye on Lila Patel, whose quiet observations might prove more valuable than all my years of conventional detective work combined. The first drops of rain hit my windshield as I pull away from the school, heading toward the courthouse where records of the Walkers' marriage, and perhaps the seeds of Robert Walker's death, are waiting to be discovered. The community center blazes with light against the autumn evening, a charity auction that Mom insisted we attend because it's important to be seen supporting good causes. What she really means is that it's important to seem normal, to be the quiet cleaning lady and her unremarkable daughter. I tug at my borrowed dress, too tight across the shoulders and smelling faintly of someone else's perfume. Then I see her across the room, Marion Walker, draped in elegant black, accepting sympathetic touches with practiced grace. My hands grow cold, but there's a heat in my chest, a burning certainty that tonight I'll find the truth. "Stay close to me," Mom whispers, her fingers light on my elbow. She's seen Marion, too. "And remember what we discussed." What we discussed was a lecture on minding my own business, on keeping my hands to myself, on remembering that people like us can't afford to make waves. What we discussed was pretending I never spoke to Detective Marshall, never followed Mrs. Walker to that cafe, never felt the cold satisfaction radiating from her like frost when our hands touched at the memorial service. "I'll get us some punch," I say, slipping away before Mom can stop me. I weave through the crowd, keeping my head down, arms tucked close to avoid accidental contact. Everyone here is playing a role. The concerned citizens, the charitable donors, the pillars of community support. And Marion Walker, the grieving widow, plays hers better than most. She stands near a display of auction items, examining a crystal vase with apparent interest. Her black dress falls in perfect lines, her makeup subtle but flawless. To anyone else, she looks like a woman bearing her loss with dignity. But I've felt what lies beneath that polished surface. I watch her from behind a column, gathering my courage. What I'm about to do breaks every rule Mom has ever set. But if Mrs. Walker really killed her husband, if what I felt at the memorial wasn't just my imagination, then someone needs to know the truth. And right now, that someone is me. I approach slowly, pretending to be interested in the auction items. Mrs. Walker doesn't notice me at first, too busy chatting with an older woman whose diamonds catch the light with every gesture. I position myself just behind them, waiting for my moment. When the older woman moves away, I step forward, deliberately dropping my program at Mrs. Walker's feet. "Oh, I'm sorry," I say, bending to pick it up at the same moment she does. Our hands meet on the glossy paper, her manicured fingers brushing against mine. The contact is brief, just a second or two, but it's enough. The world tilts, colors sharpen, sounds dim, and suddenly I'm not in my body anymore. I'm drowning in Marion Walker's emotions, not just what she feels now, but a rush of memory so intense it knocks the breath from my lungs. Triumph, cold, glittering satisfaction. The relief of a burden finally shed. These emotions wash over me first, familiar from our previous contact, but stronger now, more defined. Beneath them runs a current of anger, old and bitter, and the lingering thrill of power. Then the flashback hits. Not just emotions now, but images, sensations, fragments of memory carried on the tide of her feelings. A staircase, the polished wood of the banister smooth under her palm. Robert at the top, his face flushed with anger or fear, or both. "You think I don't know?" His voice echoes in the empty house. "You think I haven't seen the bank statements? The transfers?" Her own voice, cool and controlled. "You're being ridiculous, Robert. Come downstairs so we can discuss this like adults." His hand gripping a folder of papers. Evidence. "I've already called Arthur. It's over, Marion. The whole scheme, everything we've built. I'm done." Oh. Rage, flaring hot and sudden. The familiar weight of the heavy crystal paperweight in her hand. When did she pick that up? Her body moving up the stairs with purpose, each step deliberate. "Marion, what are you—" His eyes widening with comprehension a moment too late. The paperweight connecting with the side of his head. The sickening crack. His body tipping backward, arms flailing for balance he doesn't find. The tumble down the stairs, each thud a punctuation mark in their final conversation. The silence after. Standing over him, the paperweight still in her hand, his neck bent at an impossible angle. Not horror, not regret, just cool assessment, calculation of what comes next. Placing the paperweight back on the side table, wiping it clean, arranging his body to look like a simple fall. The practiced grief when she calls 911, the careful tears when the police arrive. I come back to myself with a gasp, my knees buckling. The room spins around me, faces blurring into smears of color and light. I'm on the floor, I realize dimly, my palms pressed against the cool tile. Someone is saying my name, but the voice seems to come from very far away. "Lila? Lila, what's wrong?" Mrs. Walker stands over me, her face arranged in a mask of concern, but her eyes are cold, assessing. She knows. Somehow she knows what I've seen. I don't feel well," I manage, my voice barely a whisper. She leans down, extending a hand as if to help me up. "Poor dear," she says, loud enough for others to hear. "Let me help you." But when she bends closer, her voice drops to a whisper only I can hear. "What an interesting talent you have. Be careful how you use it. The threat is unmistakable." My heart hammers against my ribs, panic rising in my throat. Before I can respond, Mom is there, pushing through the small crowd that's gathered around us. "Lila." She kneels beside me, her hands gentle on my shoulders. "What happened?" "She seems to have fainted," Mrs. Walker says smoothly. Perhaps the excitement was too much for her. Mom helps me to my feet, her arm steady around my waist. I lean against her, still shaking from the aftershocks of what I've experienced. The memory of violence clings to me like a film I can't wash away. "Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Walker," Mom says stiffly. "I'll take her home now." Mrs. Walker smiles, perfect white teeth against her perfect red lips. "Of course. I do hope she feels better soon." Her gaze shifts to me, her expression unchanged, but her eyes conveying a clear message. Stay quiet, or else. Mom guides me toward the exit, murmuring soothing words I barely hear. My mind is racing, sorting through what I've experienced. Not just emotions this time, but actual memories. Visual, visceral details of what really happened the night Robert Walker died. He wasn't drunk. He didn't slip. Marion killed him deliberately and without remorse because he discovered something in those bank statements, something about Arthur, whoever that is. "Mom," I whisper as we step into the cool night air, "I need to call Detective Marshall." Mom's arm tightens around me. "Lila, no. Whatever you think you felt, It wasn't just feelings this time. I pull away, meeting her eyes directly. I saw it. She hit him with a paperweight and pushed him down the stairs. He found out about something she was doing, something illegal, and she killed him to keep it quiet. Mom's face pales in the harsh parking lot light. Lila, listen to me. You can't make accusations like that, not without proof. What I saw is proof. My hands are still shaking, but my voice is steady now. And I'm going to tell Detective Marshall everything. For a moment, Mom looks like she might argue further. Then her shoulders slump, resignation settling over her like a heavy cloak. Let's go home, she says finally. We'll talk about this there. As we walk to the car, I glance back at the community center. Through the window, I can see Marion Walker, still elegant in her widow's black, still accepting condolences with practiced grace. But now I know what lies beneath that polished exterior, the cold calculation of a woman who killed without hesitation and sleeps without remorse. My hands are numb from the lingering chill of her emotions, but I feel a warmth in my chest, an uncomfortable heat that I recognize as certainty. Whatever happens next, whatever Mom says, I know what I have to do. Mrs. Walker is a killer, and somehow I have to prove it. The manila envelope sits on my desk, unmarked except for my name typed on a plain white label. No return address, no postmark. Hand-delivered to my office door sometime before dawn. I slide a letter opener under the flap, careful not to tear what might be evidence. Inside, a stack of financial documents, paper clipped together with a yellow post-it note bearing 5 words in neat block letters. Follow the money. Walker knew. I spread the contents across my desk. Bank statements, transfer authorizations, insurance policies. At first glance, it's a jumble of numbers and corporate jargon, but patterns emerge as I arrange them chronologically. Large sums moving between accounts, Walker's personal account, Marion's separate business account, and something called Bennett Holdings, LLC. The name Bennett tickles my memory, but I can't immediately place it. Most interesting are the insurance policies. Properties I've never heard of, insured for amounts that seem excessive, all processed through Bennett Insurance Group. Each policy is followed, months later, by a claim payout for fire or water damage. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidental. I reach for my phone, dialing a number I haven't used in years. "Michaels," answers a gruff voice. "It's Marshall. I need your financial expertise on something unofficial." Eddie Michaels, former forensic accountant for the police department, now retired and consulting for select clients, agrees to meet me for lunch. 2 hours later, we're sitting in a booth at the back of a diner where the coffee is terrible, but the privacy is excellent. "Insurance fraud," Michaels says, tapping the documents with a weathered finger. "Classic scheme. Insure property for more than it's worth. Arrange an accident. Collect the payout, but they've added wrinkles." He flips through several pages. "See these transfers? They're laundering the payouts through shell companies, then funneling portions back to the original property owners as investments. And Walker was involved." Michaels nods. "His signature is on the early paperwork, but look at the more recent documents, last 6 months or so. His name disappears, replaced by Marion Walker's. Either he stepped back from the operation or she pushed him out," I finish. "Any idea who Arthur is?" "Arthur Bennett, CEO of Bennett Insurance Group." Michaels slides a printout toward me. "His company processed all these claims. No way this volume of suspicious activity happens without his knowledge and approval." I study Bennett's corporate headshot, silver-haired, distinguished, with the practiced smile of someone accustomed to getting his way. The same man I saw meeting Marion at the cafe, their hands touching intimately across the table. "One more thing," Michaels says, tapping another document. That property fire last month on Oak Ridge? The investigation found traces of accelerant, but it was ruled inconclusive. That policy, he points to a signature, was one of the last ones Walker signed. After that, Marion took over all dealings with Bennett. My mind races, connecting dots. Robert Walker discovers his wife's deeper involvement in the fraud scheme, threatens to expose everything, ends up dead at the bottom of his stairs. The pieces align too perfectly to be coincidence. I thank Michaels, leave cash for lunch, and drive straight to the police station, where Officer Dennison meets me in a cramped interview room. "You sure about this, Marshal?" Dennison asks, flipping through the copies I've provided. "This is thin for a murder accusation." "It's a solid motive," I counter. Walker finds out his wife is involved in insurance fraud with her lover, Arthur Bennett, threatens to blow the whistle, suddenly has a fatal accident on his well-maintained stairs. Dennison taps his pen against the table. "Motive, sure, but you've got no physical evidence linking her to his death. The ME ruled it consistent with an accidental fall." "Because they weren't looking for homicide," I argue. "No toxicology beyond standard alcohol screening, no thorough examination of the scene for evidence of struggle. Even if we reopen the investigation now, the scene's been cleaned, evidence lost. And we can't get a warrant based on financial records that may or may not suggest fraud." Dennison sighs. "Unless you've got a witness or physical evidence connecting her directly to his death, this stays a tragic accident." I hesitate, thinking of Lila Patel. Not a conventional witness, certainly not one whose testimony would stand up in court, but perhaps the only person who knows what really happened that night. "I'm working on it," I say finally. Back in my car, I sit staring at the station's brick facade. The case against Marion Walker is compelling but circumstantial. Financial motive, relationship with Bennett, suspicious timing, all suggestive, none conclusive. No prosecutor would touch it without more. My phone buzzes, unknown number. "Marshall," I answer. "Mr. Marshall, this is Nisha Patel." Her voice is tight, controlled. "Lila's mother." I straighten in my seat. "Mrs. Patel, is everything all right?" "No." A pause, then. "Lila had an episode last night at a charity event. Mrs. Walker was there." My pulse quickens. "What kind of episode?" "She touched Mrs. Walker. What she experienced was—" Another pause. "Different, stronger than before. She saw—" Mrs. Patel's voice cracks slightly. "She says she saw what really happened the night Mr. Walker died." I grip the phone tighter. "I need to speak with her." "I know." The resignation in her voice is palpable. "That's why I'm calling. I've tried to protect her, to keep her out of this, but she won't let it go. And if what she saw is true, it may be the key to this entire case," I finish. "She says Mrs. Walker hit him with a paperweight, that he had discovered something about bank transfers and was threatening to call someone named Arthur. Arthur Bennett. The connection crystallizes perfectly. Mrs. Patel, I've received information that suggests Robert Walker discovered his wife was involved in financial fraud with Arthur Bennett of Bennett Insurance. If what Lila experienced is accurate, it provides the missing piece, direct evidence of Marion's motive and method. "But who would believe her?" Mrs. Patel asks, the question I've been wrestling with myself. A 13-year-old girl who claims to feel other people's emotions and memories through touch? Perhaps no one, if she stands alone, I admit, but combined with the financial evidence, and if we can get Marion to incriminate herself, I think for a moment, formulating a plan. It's unorthodox, potentially risky, but it might be our only chance to uncover the truth. "Mrs. Patel, would you and Lila be willing to meet with me tomorrow? There's someone from the police department I'd like to include, Officer Dennison. He's skeptical but fair-minded. If we present the financial evidence and Lila shares what she experienced, you want to use my daughter as bait." Mrs. Patel says flatly. No, as a witness. I choose my next words carefully. I believe your daughter has a gift that most people don't understand, but I also believe she's seen something true, something that could bring justice for a man who was murdered. The silence stretches long enough that I wonder if she's hung up. Tomorrow afternoon, she finally says, at our apartment. Officer Dennison may come, but no one else. And if at any point I feel Lila is being exploited or disbelieved, we end it immediately. Agreed, I say, relief flooding through me. 3 o'clock? 3 o'clock, she confirms, then adds in a softer voice, Mr. Marshall, my daughter has carried the burden of her sensitivity her entire life. It has cost her friends, her relationship with her father, her sense of normalcy. Please don't make her carry the burden of a murder investigation, too, unless you truly believe her. I believe her, I say, and realize with some surprise that I do. And I'll do everything I can to ensure she's protected. After Mrs. Patel hangs up, I sit for a long moment, considering my next move. The financial evidence provides motive. Lila's experience provides method and opportunity. Together, they paint a compelling picture of murder. But to make it stick, we need something more. A confession, or at least an incriminating statement from Marion Walker herself. Which means setting a trap and using a 13-year-old empath as part of the bait. I start the car, already planning how to approach Dennison, how to arrange the meeting, how to create circumstances where Marion Walker might reveal the truth she's so carefully hidden. It's a gamble, but sometimes in detective work, unconventional methods are the only path to justice. And if Lila Patel really did witness Robert Walker's murder through Marion's memories, she deserves to see his killer brought to account, not just for Walker's sake, but for her own. The Patel apartment is modest but meticulously clean, smelling faintly of cardamom and furniture polish. Mrs. Patel has arranged 5 chairs in a rough circle in the living room, the forced intimacy of the setup already creating tension. Lila sits with her hands folded in her lap, smaller somehow in her own home, while Dennison shifts uncomfortably in a chair, clearly meant for someone of slighter build. I check my watch. 2:58. When the doorbell rings, Lila flinches as if she's been shocked, and I wonder if her sensitivity extends beyond touch, if she can somehow feel Marion Walker's presence on the other side of the door. I'll get it, Mrs. Patel says, smoothing her skirt before walking to the entryway. Dennison leans toward me. You really think this is going to work? He whispers, skepticism heavy in his voice. We'll see, I respond, keeping my expression neutral as Marion Walker glides into the room. She's dressed in a tailored black pantsuit that probably cost more than 6 months' rent on this apartment, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe twist. Her eyes scan the room, taking in Dennison's police presence with a slight narrowing of her gaze. This is an unusual venue for a discussion about Robert's affairs, she says, her voice cool as she settles into the remaining chair. She doesn't look directly at Lila, though I notice the girl shrinks back slightly when Marion sits. You mentioned on the phone you had questions about his estate, Mr. Marshall? Among other things, I say. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Walker. I believe you know everyone here. Her smile doesn't reach her eyes. Of course. Ms. Patel cleans for me. And her daughter. She finally glances at Lila, the look brief but pointed. We've met at several functions. Officer Dennison you know from the investigation into your husband's death, I continue. A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crosses her face. I wasn't aware the investigation was ongoing. I thought the matter was settled. New evidence has come to light, I say, reaching for my briefcase. I remove the financial documents, spreading them on the coffee table. These were delivered to me anonymously, They detail what appears to be an extensive insurance fraud scheme involving your husband, yourself, and Arthur Bennett of Bennett Insurance Group. Marion's expression doesn't change, but her fingers tense slightly on the arm of her chair. I'm not sure what you're implying, Mr. Marshall, but my husband handled our financial affairs. If there are irregularities, they would have been his responsibility. Interesting you should say that. I point to several documents. These older transactions do bear Robert's signature, but more recent ones, the last 6 months especially, are signed by you. In fact, it appears you took over the relationship with Bennett Insurance quite thoroughly. Her lips thin. If you're suggesting something improper, I'm stating facts, Mrs. Walker, facts that establish a timeline where your husband stepped back from these transactions, perhaps because he became aware of their illegal nature. Facts that establish you had both motive and opportunity when he died. Dennison leans forward, his professional demeanor taking over. Mrs. Walker, we have reason to believe your husband's death may not have been accidental. This is absurd. Marion's voice remains controlled, but spots of color appear high on her cheeks. Robert fell down the stairs. The medical examiner confirmed it. The medical examiner confirmed injuries consistent with a fall, I correct, but not what caused that fall. Marion's gaze darts between us, then settles on Lila with sudden understanding. I see. This is about the girl's ridiculous claims, isn't it? At the memorial service and then at the charity auction? She laughs, the sound brittle. You're basing a murder accusation on the imagination of a 13-year-old? Mrs. Patel stiffens but remains silent. This is the moment we've prepared for. Lila, I say gently, would you please tell Mrs. Walker what you experienced when you touched her hand at the charity auction? Lila looks up, her dark eyes steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. I saw what happened the night Mr. Walker died. What really happened. This is preposterous, Marion snaps. I don't have to listen to— You were at the bottom of the stairs, Lila continues, her voice gaining strength. Mr. Walker was at the top, holding a folder of papers, bank statements. He said he'd called Arthur, that it was over. The scheme, everything you'd built. He said he was done. Marion's face pales slightly, but she rallies. You've clearly been coached. These financial documents could have suggested such a scenario to anyone. You picked up a paperweight, Lila says, the words coming faster now. Heavy, made of crystal. You walked up the stairs toward him. He asked what you were doing, and then— She swallows hard. You hit him with it, on the side of his head. He fell backward down the stairs. You heard his neck break. You weren't sorry. You were relieved, satisfied. The room falls silent. Dennison's expression has shifted from skepticism to intense focus. You placed the paperweight back on the side table, Lila continues. You wiped it clean. You arranged his body to look like he'd fallen accidentally. Then you called 911 and pretended to cry. Marion's laugh is harsh. What an active imagination. Crystal paperweights and secret confessions. It's like something from a cheap novel. Officer Dennison, surely you don't take this seriously. Dennison's gaze is thoughtful. The interesting thing is, Mrs. Walker, there was no paperweight mentioned in the police report. The detail about wiping it clean and replacing it, that wasn't public knowledge. Because it didn't happen, Marion says, but there's a new edge to her voice. The medical report did note an unusual contusion on the side of Mr. Walker's head, Dennison continues, consistent with impact from a blunt object before the fall. But since no weapon was found, it was assumed he hit something on the way down. I watch Marion carefully. The crystal paperweight is still in your house, isn't it? On the side table in the foyer. I noticed it during our conversation there. Many homes have paperweights, she says dismissively. It proves nothing. It might if forensics were to examine it, Dennison says. Even thorough cleaning can leave trace evidence. This is harassment. Marion stands abruptly. I'm leaving. If you have actual charges, you can contact my attorney. You cleaned the paperweight, Lila says suddenly, her voice quiet but clear. But you forgot about the blood on the carpet. Just a few drops at the top of the stairs. You didn't see them until later, after the police left. You cut that section out and replaced it with a piece from the closet. Marion freezes, her face a mask of shock that quickly transforms into fury. You little liar! How dare you— We never mentioned blood on the carpet, Dennison interrupts, standing slowly. How would Lila know you replaced a section of carpet, Mrs. Walker? I didn't, Marion stammers. She's making it up. All of it. Are we? I ask. Or did Robert really discover the fraud scheme? Did he really threaten to expose you and Bennett? Did you really hit him with the paperweight when he said he'd already called Arthur? He was going to ruin everything, Marion says, the words bursting out before she can stop them. Years of work, millions in profits, all because he suddenly developed a conscience. He'd been perfectly happy to benefit from the arrangement until then. The admission hangs in the air, stark and damning. Marion seems to realize what she said, her hand flying to her mouth too late. You didn't expect him to find out about your affair with Bennett, did you? I press, sensing her control slipping. Or that he'd threatened to go to the authorities? He wasn't supposed to be home, Marion whispers, her composure cracking entirely. He was supposed to be at his club. I was just retrieving some documents when I heard him upstairs in his study, going through the files. So you confronted him, Dennison says, his voice quiet but firm. And when he wouldn't back down, you killed him. Marion's eyes dart around the room like a trapped animal's. They settle on Lila with naked hatred. How? How could you possibly know these things? No one was there. No one saw. Lila meets her gaze steadily. I felt it when I touched you. All of it. The anger, the calculation, how you felt when you hit him, how you feel now, remembering it. You're a freak, Marion hisses. No one will believe you. I believe her, Dennison says, removing handcuffs from his belt. And your own words just confirmed everything she said. Marion Walker, you're under arrest for the murder of Robert Walker. You have the right to remain silent. As Dennison recites the Miranda rights, Marion seems to collapse in on herself, the perfect poise of the grieving widow replaced by the desperate fury of a cornered predator. When he takes her arm to lead her out, she jerks away violently. You think this will stick? She snarls. It's the word of a disturbed child against a respected widow. My lawyers will destroy her. Mrs. Patel, who has been silent throughout the confrontation, rises from her chair. She steps between Marion and her daughter, her small frame somehow imposing in its certainty. No, she says simply, they won't, because my daughter is telling the truth, and I will stand beside her no matter what comes next. Lila's eyes widen at her mother's declaration. For perhaps the first time since I've met her, she looks like what she is, a child, vulnerable and relieved to have her parents' protection. As Dennison leads Marion from the apartment, the woman's composure completely shattered. I turn to Lila and her mother. Thank you, I say, both of you. I know how difficult this was. Mrs. Patel nods, her hand resting on Lila's shoulder. It was necessary. The truth needed to be told. Lila looks up at me, her dark eyes solemn. She'll still try to deny it, say I made it all up. She might, I admit, but the financial evidence, combined with her own admissions today, gives us a strong case. And now that we know what to look for, the replaced carpet, the paperweight, forensics may find physical evidence as well. And if they don't? Lila asks. Then we still have your testimony, I tell her. And sometimes the truth finds a way to be heard, even when others try to silence it. As I gather my notes, I watch Mrs. Patel embrace her daughter, whispering something in her ear that makes Lila's tense shoulders relax slightly. The burden they've carried, Lila with her extraordinary sensitivity, her mother with her fear for her child's well-being, seems lighter somehow, shared between them and with those who finally believe. The truth has a weight of its own, I think, but so does faith. And today, in this modest apartment, both have prevailed over a carefully constructed lie. Autumn has deepened its hold on the city, painting the park in rust and gold. I sit on a bench watching fallen leaves skitter across the path, waiting for the Patels to arrive. 3 weeks have passed since Marion Walker's arrest, 3 weeks of headlines, forensic reports, and the slow grinding of justice's wheels. I spot them approaching from the east entrance, Mrs. Patel walking close beside her daughter, protective as always, but not hovering quite as anxiously as before. Lila's hair tumbles loose today instead of being confined in neat braids, a small but significant liberation. They notice me and change direction, Lila lifting a hand in a tentative wave. She looks different, still solemn, still careful, but something in her posture has shifted. Less hunched against the world, perhaps, less afraid of her own shadow. "Mr. Marshall," Mrs. Patel greets me with a nod. "Thank you for meeting us." "My pleasure," I say, standing to offer them the bench. "I wanted to update you in person." Lila sits, leaving space between herself and the bench's arm, room for me to sit without accidental contact. The consideration is automatic for her, I realize, a lifetime habit of maintaining barriers. "They found the carpet," I tell them, settling into the offered space. Just as Lila described, a section had been replaced at the top of the stairs. Forensics found traces of blood, despite Marion's efforts to clean it. "And the paperweight?" Mrs. Patel asks. "Also contained microscopic blood residue in a crack along the base. DNA matched Robert Walker's." I glance at Lila, whose expression remains carefully neutral. The district attorney is confident about the case, even without relying on Lila's testimony. "So she won't have to testify in court?" Relief softens Mrs. Patel's features. "It's unlikely. Between the forensic evidence, the financial motive we uncovered, and Marion's own statements during the arrest, the case is strong. Bennett is also in custody, facing fraud charges. He's apparently eager to make a deal, which may include testifying against Marion." Lila's shoulders relax slightly, though her expression remains grave. "Will people know about how you found out? About me?" "No," I assure her. "The official record shows an anonymous tip led us to investigate the financial connections, which in turn led to a closer examination of the physical evidence. Your involvement doesn't need to be part of the public narrative." The relief on both their faces is palpable. Public scrutiny would be its own kind of prison for Lila, having her ability dissected, doubted, sensationalized. "You've both been through enough," I add. "You deserve privacy." "Thank you," Mrs. Patel says quietly, "for believing her. Not many would have." I think about this as we sit in companionable silence, watching a squirrel gather acorns with frantic determination. Why do people fear truths they can't explain? I've encountered it throughout my career. Witnesses hesitant to share hunches that proved accurate, colleagues dismissing intuitions that later solved cases, society preferring comfortable lies to uncomfortable mysteries. "People fear what they don't understand," I say finally. "Your ability challenges their neat categories of what's possible." Lila looks up, surprised that I've addressed her directly on the topic. "Did you believe me right away? Really believe me?" I consider the question honestly. "No, I was intrigued, but skeptical. It was the consistency between what you perceived and the evidence that convinced me. That, and meeting Dr. Brenner, who documented your history of accurate perceptions. Most people never get past the skepticism," Lila says. "They think I'm making things up or that I'm—" She trails off. "Weird," I finish for her. Different, threatening to their worldview. She nods. I've had hunches throughout my career that I couldn't explain, I tell her. Moments of clarity that seemed to come from nowhere. Not like what you experience, but enough to make me wonder about the limits of conventional perception. Mrs. Patel checks her watch. We should go soon. Lila has a doctor's appointment at 4. I stand, offering my hand to Mrs. Patel, who takes it briefly. Thank you again for your help with the case. Both of you. As we say our goodbyes, I notice Lila watching me with a thoughtful expression. I wonder what she senses from me, what emotions radiate through my professional demeanor. Satisfaction at justice served, lingering concern for her well-being, or perhaps simply the bone-deep fatigue that follows every case, solved or otherwise. Before they leave, Lila speaks again, her voice soft but clear. It will always be this way, won't it? People being afraid of what I can do? I meet her eyes, seeing the wisdom there that comes from carrying an invisible burden. Some people will be afraid, others will be curious or dismissive. But you'll also find people who understand, or at least try to. Those are the ones to keep close. She nods, a faint smile touching her lips. Like Dr. Brenner. And you. And your mother? I add, nodding toward Mrs. Patel, who watches her daughter with new understanding in her eyes. As they walk away, I remain on the bench, turning over the events of the past weeks in my mind. Marion Walker sits in a cell, her carefully constructed life in ruins. Justice has been served, at least in this case, but I find myself thinking less about the murderer and more about the unusual witness who brought her to justice. The park is quieter after Mr. Marshall leaves. Mom and I walk slowly toward the bus stop, the silence between us comfortable rather than strained. Things have changed between us since the day of Marion Walker's arrest, since Mom finally stood up for me, declared her belief in me publicly. The secret we've carried for years feels lighter somehow, shared rather than hidden. We have time before your appointment, Mom says. Would you like to stop for tea? I nod, and we divert to a small cafe at the edge of the park. Inside, it's warm and smells of cinnamon. I choose a table away from other customers. Habit, always habit, and Mom goes to order. While I wait, I watch people through the window. A young couple holding hands, their emotions visible even without touch in the way they lean toward each other. An old man feeding pigeons, contentment radiating from his stooped frame. A harried mother with 2 small children, her love and exhaustion tangled together like yarn. I've been practicing in small ways, not avoiding all touch as I once did, but choosing it carefully, learning to prepare myself, to build mental walls that allow me to feel without being overwhelmed. Dr. Brenner has been helping, calling it controlled exposure therapy rather than embracing the more mystical explanations for what I can do. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that for the first time, I'm learning to see my sensitivity as a strength rather than just a curse. Mom returns with 2 steaming cups, sliding one toward me. Her fingers brush mine as she passes the cup, a contact so brief most wouldn't notice. But I feel it. Her love, her pride, her lingering worry. And underneath, something new. Acceptance. Not just tolerance of my difference, but genuine acceptance. I look up, meeting her eyes. I felt that, I say quietly. She doesn't pretend not to understand. I know. You're not afraid anymore. Not like before. Mom sips her tea, considering. I'm still afraid for you. The world isn't kind to those who are different. But I'm not afraid of what you can do. She reaches across the table, deliberately placing her hand over mine. This is who you are, who you've always been, and I'm sorry if I ever made you feel that it was something to be ashamed of. The emotions flowing from her touch are complex, love layered with regret, hope threaded through with lingering fear. But the acceptance is real, solid as the table between us. I turn my hand, returning the pressure of her fingers. "It's okay. I was afraid of it too." "And now?" she asks. I think maybe it's just another way of seeing," I say slowly. "Not always easy, not always welcome, but sometimes useful." Mom smiles, a real smile that erases the worry lines around her eyes for a moment. Like any gift, it depends how you use it. We finish our tea in companionable silence. As we leave the cafe, I keep my hands in my pockets, from habit more than necessity. The world is still full of emotions I'm not ready to feel, touches I'm not prepared to interpret. My sensitivity will always set me apart, always make ordinary interactions complicated in ways others can't understand. But for the first time, I don't feel entirely alone with it. Detective Marshall believed me. Mom believes me. And somewhere out there are others who might understand too, people whose perceptions don't fit neatly into conventional boxes, whose truths are too strange for easy acceptance. Maybe someday I'll find them. Until then, I have this moment. Walking beside my mother on an autumn afternoon, the burden of my gift a little lighter than before, the world a little less frightening in its overwhelming intensity. Not normal, never normal, but perhaps finally accepted.